We are now moving into the discussion of Kamala Harris's recent interview with Meet the Press. As you can imagine, they got to get this woman to stop doing interviews. They got to get this woman to stop doing interviews. So as you can imagine, I'm just going to get into it. We're going to start at 8:48, where she starts to get into the discussion about Joe Biden. As you can imagine, it's pretty cringe. I'm going to chime in here and there. And I also noticed something else about this interview. Kamala Harris does not look the same. Now, I don't like to do like the personal attacks, calling people like, names or whatever. But I want you to just pay close attention to Kamala Harris. She does not look the same. So let's get started.
I think back to the president's inaugural address, and he said the following: politics need not be a raging fire destroying everything in its path. And then I think about the language construction he used with semi-fascist. And I understand the dilemma. You got to call it out in order to bring the country together. But it's hard to do both at the same time, isn't it?
Well, here's the thing.
So he's referring to the speech that Joe Biden gave recently in Philadelphia. We talked about that here on this show, where he was saying that he was trying to bring the country together, but at the same time, he was attacking a particular group, people who are, call themselves like MAGA. He was attacking that group. And I thought that was a bad idea. How are you going to say you're bringing people together and you're isolating, singling out one particular group? That's not unity, that's division. So I didn't think him making that speech was a good idea. But listen to her response here.
Let's talk about our president for a moment. Joe Biden has spent his entire career, it is on for all to see, working across the aisle. His whole career, sometimes he's been criticized for.
Let's hear this one more time. Let's listen to her here.
In order to bring the country together. But it's hard to do both at the same time, isn't it?
Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about our president for a moment. Joe Biden has spent his entire career, it is on for all to see, working across the aisle. His whole career, sometimes he's been criticized.
Let's pause right there for a moment. Sometimes he's been criticized. Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say, Desert Mantis. He should have been criticized. Let's talk about him working across the aisle because, we heard this a lot when he was running for president. Who was he working with when he crossed those aisles? People like to talk about him working across the aisle. He worked across the aisle to work with racist Strom Thurmond. Are we going to talk about that? And not just to have tea or to have a bite to eat, but to write legislation. To write legislation that would criminalize particularly Black men. Let's talk about that. When people bring up Joe Biden working across the aisle, make sure you mention that part. Who was he working with? Let's not forget that. And it's interesting because here comes Kamala Harris. Yes, she's the vice president, so obviously she's going to defend him. But she was also the one during the Democrat debates that went after Joe Biden, basically calling him a segregationist. That little girl was me. Isn't that laughable? She had T-shirts made and ready to go with her face on it. That's why I say American politics is a joke. So she called Joe Biden out for that same type of behavior. And here she is defending him working across the aisle. But we can't work across the aisle. Because, see, according to that speech that Joe Biden gave, see, this is the thing. I'm not supposed to work with my neighbor for worker rights and for class issues if they're MAGA or if they're Republican, period. We're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to put political ideology aside and work with people who are part of the working class or part of people who are poor. We can't do that. But it's okay for these politicians in DC to do it. Remember that.
For believing in bipartisanship, for believing in compromise, for believing in working across the aisle, finding common ground.
Working across the aisle and finding common ground. So she said that, not me. And what common ground? We're going back to the crime bill again, because I will not let this go. What common ground did Joe Biden have with Strom Thurmond in reference to the crime bill? I guess both him and Strom Thurmond wanted to lock up black men. Let that marinate for a minute. Think about that. That's what they had in common.
His whole career has been that. But there are moments in time when we have to also agree, all good people who care about our country, that there are those who right now are vividly not defending our democracy.
This is the talking point that all of them have been using. Kamala, Joe Biden, Ro Khanna, even AOC is doing it as well, not defending our democracy. We don't have a real democracy. I've told you guys about this before. They know that, by the way. If we had a real democracy, third party and independent candidates wouldn't have to fight just to get on the ballot, only to be taken off by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. If we had a real democracy. If we had a real democracy, technically, the popular vote would win, not the Electoral College. If we had a real democracy. But they're using this term because they're trying to resonate, particularly, especially with younger people. They're trying to resonate with people who are liberals, people who, some of us who are independents. They're trying to resonate with those groups of people because they want them to be afraid that, listen, if the Republicans win, we could lose our democracy. Newsflash, for people who are worried about paying their rent next month, for people who are hoping that they don't get an unexpected expense like their car breaks down, for people who are wondering where they're going to get their next meal from, for people going to work Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, crossing their fingers, hoping they're not going to get laid off. Those people are not thinking about your democracy. People who are struggling to make it are not waking up every morning thinking, I wonder about the United States democracy. No, they are thinking about how are they going to pay these bills. Do you think the average single parent who doesn't have childcare, who's working 2 jobs, and their kid basically has to raise theirself, do you think they're thinking about our democracy when they get up and they go to work in the morning? Not at all. Not one bit. You got to pass it on. You got to pass it on. They act like it's the most important thing, and it is not the most important thing.
And I think we want that our commander-in-chief, that the president of the United States, will speak up and raise the alarm about what this means to our strength and our future, much less our integrity.
I'm curious, when you see the Democratic Party and some parts of the party funding ads.
How are you going to talk about integrity? And here you have one of your own calling people and telling them to drop out of the race to help Joe Biden win. How are you going to talk about integrity?
To promote some of these election deniers in primaries, whether it's Michigan, the high profile race there, Illinois, Colorado, New Hampshire. It looks like a cynical, a little bit cynical. And the president went out of his way to say there are good Republicans here. Should you leave the good Republicans alone in a primary? Is the Democratic Party making a mistake here by those people could win if you're not careful?
I mean, listen, I'm not going to.
You hear the fear mongering? Those people could win if we're not careful. Trump derangement syndrome.
tell people how to run their campaigns. I ran in terms of statewide office.
Would you have done this? Would you?
So she just said she's not going to tell people how to run their campaigns, and I 100% agree. She couldn't get a single delegate, you guys. Why is he asking her about how people should run their campaigns?
You have done this. Is this something you'd be comfortable with?
I'm not going to tell people how to run their campaigns, Chuck. I ran for a statewide for Attorney General, re-election, won both times, for Senate, won that race. And I know that it is best to let a candidate, along with their advisors, let them make the decision based on what they believe is in the best interest of their state. I'm not going to tell people what to do.
You're not worried that this reflects poorly on the Democrats?
I think that what we have to focus on is that in 60 days as of this interview, in less than 2 months, we are looking at a midterm election in which so much is on the line. Take, for example.
Once again, she didn't answer the question. She is the queen of not answering the question. I've seen her do this multiple times in interviews. And that's my point. Like, he's asking her a question here, which is, you don't think this is going to hurt the Democrats? Doesn't answer the question. She deflects and moves on to something else.
The issue of choice. The United States Supreme Court in the Dobbs decision just took a constitutional right that had been recognized from the women of America, from the people of America. Well, how does that relate to the midterms? Our president has said he will not let the filibuster get in the way. If the Senate, through a majority vote, votes to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, he will sign it into law. You know what that means? In the midterms, we need to hold on to the Senate and get 2 more. And then we can put into law the protections of Roe v. Wade.
You should be able to work with the ones that you have right now, though. That's the problem, Kamala. This is the problem. Let's go back here just for a second. Right there.
Right. That had been recognized from the women of America, from the people of America. Well, how does that relate to the midterms? Our president has said he will not let the filibuster get in the way. If the Senate, through a majority vote, votes to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, he will sign it into law. You know what that means? In the midterms, we need to hold on to the Senate and get 2 more.
If the Senate passes it, what is the backup plan if they don't? Does anybody ask them this question when they interview them? What is the backup plan? What's plan B? Or plan C? Or D? However many backups you need. What's the backup plan? This is all banking on the Senate passing. That's if they do, but you should be able to pass it with the people you have now. That's the problem. She is the tiebreaker. When has she stepped in when she's had opportunities to do so over legislation? When has she stepped in to break the tie? She's deflected to the Senate parliamentarian. The only reason they're even chasing this right now with Roe v. Wade is because the Supreme Court overturned it, because the Democratic Party allowed this to go on for decades when they could have codified Roe v. Wade into law decades ago. Decades ago. When people say, well, Obama couldn't have done it because Lieberman wasn't going to be for it. Okay, you could have got rid of the filibuster. They didn't do that either. There were multiple opportunities when they could have resolved this. They're in panic mode now because now they kind of need to fix it if they want to keep their seats, if they want to win in the midterms, if they want to win in 2024. They have to do something now. And this goes back to the point I've made before. It's only when you put pressure on them, when you push them. And this time, the pressure did not come from the outside at first. The pressure came from the Supreme Court when they overturned it. They had plenty of time to fix this. It's laughable at best. And that's why I told you I felt like they held this as a card in their back pocket to pull it out when they felt it was most necessary. And that time is right now. If they cared that much about women's rights, why didn't they codify it into law decades ago? No one is answering that question, by the way.
And then we can put into law the protections of Roe v. Wade. Everything is on the line when you think about the millions of women and people in America who care about them, who understand the significance of protecting a woman's right to make decisions about her own body instead of her government telling her what to do.
52 Senate seats or more. Legislative filibuster gone, or just on this issue?
The president has been clear on this issue and on a very important issue in addition to that important issue, which is voting rights. And the president has been very clear.
Of course, it's going to be about voting rights. But remember, when they say voting rights, they don't mean voting rights to vote for whoever you want. It's not voting rights to vote for any candidate you want to vote for. It's voting rights to vote for a Democrat or Republican. And if it's coming from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they're talking about getting you to come out to vote for the Democratic Party. It's not voting rights for you to vote third party. It's not voting rights for you to vote for independent candidates. It's not. It's to keep you in the same corrupt, decrepit system that exists and has existed for decades and really has not helped any of us.
He will sign into law and not let the filibuster get in the way, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Because what is happening in our country, in states around our country, including this very state, they are passing laws making it more difficult for people to vote.
That has been going on for a long time, Kamala. That didn't start this year. People have been complaining about this for years. You want to talk about voting rights? How about you mention the fact that you have both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party gerrymandering districts? Both of them do that. We want to talk about voting rights.
And so our president has said we need to have protections to make sure that every American, whoever they vote for, has the unobstructed ability to do that when it is otherwise their right. So,
but the laws that we have right now aren't even in place for us to do that. The laws that we have right now aren't even in place for people to vote for the people they want to vote for. Like she just said, whoever they want to vote for. It's not whoever. It's not whoever, Kamala. It's the people running as a Democrat or the people running as a Republican. Let's be real.
Everything is on the line in these elections in just less than 2 months.
When you were a senator, you weren't ready to get rid of the legislative filibuster as of 2017. What has changed?
Well, let's talk about what we've seen around the country, in particular after together with Joe Biden, when we won and he became president and I became vice president, which was as a result of some of the highest number of people voting that have ever voted in a presidential election. And then you almost immediately, so-called extremist leaders around the country starting to pass laws making it more difficult for people to vote.
That was already happening, Kamala. Do you guys see the problem here? I'm not saying that didn't happen after they won, but the voting laws, that has been an issue for a while where they were doing that. And I can tell you, when I lived in South Carolina, they were doing this. They were doing this years ago in South Carolina. So this woman, and I told you, she looks different here. I don't know if it's stress. I don't know what it is, but she don't look the same as she did when she ran in 2020.
Because I guess it worried them that people realized, hey, I'm working 2 jobs, but a drop box makes it easier for me to fill out the ballot in the middle of the night and go drop it off instead of standing in line. Hey,
I'm working 2 jobs. Did anyone catch the capitalism issue there? Wait a minute. Do not see. Hold on.
Election.
Here we go.
And then you almost immediately, so-called extremist leaders around the country starting to pass laws making it more difficult for people to vote. Because I guess it worried them that people realized, hey, I'm working 2 jobs, but a drop box makes it easier for me to fill out the ballot in the middle of the night and go drop it off instead of standing in line.
Okay, 2 problems. She says people are like, hey, I'm working 2 jobs. Problem number 1, people shouldn't have to work 2 jobs in this country. She glosses over that. People should not have to work 2 jobs in this country. Period. Second, she makes it seem like the most next important thing for that person working those 2 jobs is that they needed to vote. And the reality of the situation is this: the majority of Americans do not vote. Now take that same group and look at people who are working 2 jobs. Most people working 2 jobs are not thinking about voting. How can you even say that and not address the poverty situation in this country when you mention people working 2 jobs? How can you say that and not talk about the problems with workers being exploited in this country? How can you say that and not talk about the fact that people don't have a living wage in this country? How can you mention that, Kamala, and not even bring up the real problem here?
Hey, voting by mail, especially if I have disabilities, the physical disabilities that make it more difficult for me to stand in line for 4 hours, I can vote by mail. And I think that scared some people, that the American people were voting in such large numbers.
Are you comfortable that this could end the legislative filibuster for good? Probably, even if you
No,
only
I'm not.
try to do it
No,
for
I'm
2
not.
issues, that it
No,
won't
I'm
end
not.
up getting rid of it? You think it will be held into place on other issues?
I think that there are, that is very likely, yes.
How much should former President Trump's status as a former president and a potential 2024 candidate, how much should that factor into the decision to charge him?
Well, I wouldn't dare tell the Department of Justice what to do. As a former prosecutor, I will tell you, I am not in the business of telling a prosecutor what to do with their case, because they know best the facts and the evidence as applied to the law. And so
I think she might have had a couple of cocktails before this interview. I'm
not going to tell them what to do. And certainly the president and I and our administration, unlike the previous administration,
Right.
have been very, very careful to make sure that there is no question about any kind of interference in terms of the decisions that the Department of Justice makes.
All right.
In that regard.
But let me try to go to 60,000 feet. What do you say to the argument that it would be too divisive for the country to prosecute a former president?
I think that our country is a country that has gone through different periods of time where the unthinkable has happened, and where there has been a call for justice, and justice has been served. And I think that's potentially going to always be the case in our country, that people are going to demand justice, and they rightly do.
If you thought,
Wait a minute. Maybe I misheard this. Give me just a second here.
And certainly the president and I and our administration, unlike the previous administration,
Right.
have been very, very careful to make sure that there is no question about any kind of interference in terms of the decisions that the Department of Justice makes.
all right.
In that regard.
But let me try to go to 60,000 feet. What do you say to the argument that it would be too divisive for the country to prosecute a former president?
I think that our country is a country that has gone through different periods of time where the unthinkable has happened, and where there has been a call for justice, and justice has been served.
When? What periods of time is she referring to? Who is she referring to? When was that? When did that happen? And when was justice served? Because based on what I've seen in reference to the history of presidents in the United States, a lot of times justice has not been served. They've gotten away with a lot. Huh.
And I think that's potentially going to always be the case in our country, that people are going to demand justice, and they rightly do.
Have you thought through the scenarios that you might face on January 6, 2025?
Not at all. No. I mean, well, listen,
This is interesting to me. I've seen them ask this question to Jamal Bowman as well. And he said the same thing. Oh, I'm not thinking about 2024. And I said, you should. If you're a politician currently sitting in DC, you should be thinking about what's happening in 2024. It's not that far away. And then now you have Kamala Harris. She's asked basically the same question. And she's like, no, she's not thinking about it. Oh, okay.
what have I thought about? I have thought about the fact that right now we have an election in less than 2 months. And if we're going to look at timelines, that's one of the most immediate timelines that I'm looking at.
I know, but I mean, have you thought about how you might handle a certification that did not reflect the outcome of the popular vote in the state?
I haven't gotten to that point yet. I have to believe that that the United States Congress and all people who have taken an oath to defend our democracy will ensure and will stand up against anyone who tries to destroy or circumvent the rules and the practices and procedures that we've had in place that have allowed a peaceful transfer of power since the inception of our nation and the founding of our nation. And getting back to the ultimate point, that is what we're talking about when we think about January 6th. We have always had a peaceful transfer of power in our nation, no matter our differences, no matter how bloody knuckled we've been in campaigns.
Can we say that now?
Well, certainly we were on the verge of having a very different outcome. And the injury was still an injury for which we still are experiencing the wound.
Terrible. Bye, Chuck. I think I'm not going to play the whole thing. Is there one? Oh, wait, I think there's this part.
A bill to create a pathway to citizenship. The border is secure, but we also have.
What? This is the part. Hold on. This is the part where they start to talk about immigration. I'm going to play this part because I want you guys to hear this. Remember, when it comes to the border, that was her responsibility. That's what she was assigned to take care of. So listen to this.
I believe government should not be saying no exception for rape or incest. As a prosecutor, former prosecutor who specialized in child sexual assault cases, understanding the violence that occurs against women and children, and then to further subject them to those kind of inhumane conditions. That's what I believe.
Final topic here. Since we're here in Texas, I want to ask you about the border. Would you call the border secure?
I think that there is no question that we have to do what the president and I asked Congress to do. Is the first request we made. Pass a bill to create a pathway to citizenship. The border is secure. But
the border is secure? Then how are people still coming over, Kamala? Did you? Oh. Okay. I'm not making this up. She just told you the border is secure. Okay. Because based on what I've seen, and by the way, this is coming from Joe Biden's press secretary herself, where she talked about they still haven't filled in. She's like, yeah, basically they're going to add on to Trump's border wall. That hasn't been completed yet. People are still coming across. What do you mean it's secure? How could you blatantly lie? Kids are still in the cages. Did you get the kids out of the cages yet? He better push back on this.
We also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border's secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
No, 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 no. That is not what he was asking. Okay, I'm with Chuck on this one. One more
broken
time.
Immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border's secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration. But there are still a lot of problems that we are trying to fix.
Then it's not secure. If someone tells you that you're about to have 2 million people cross over, it is not secure. Oh my God. JB said, if Chuck Todd can take you down, you lost the plot, ma'am. Yes. What? Here I am agreeing with Chuck. So you know it's bad. You know it's bad.
Given the deterioration that happened over the last 4 years, we also have to put in place a law and a plan for a pathway for citizenship for the millions of people who are here and are prepared to do what is legally required to gain citizenship. We don't have that in place because people are playing politics in a state like this and in Congress. By the way, you want to talk about bipartisanship on an issue?
You're playing politics too. That's your job.
Issue that at one time was a bipartisan issue, both in terms of Republican senators and even presidents.
Right now, one of our inflationary problems is we don't have enough labor, particularly in the service economy.
You're right.
A solution on immigration reform that increased particularly lower wage labor could actually have an impact on lowering inflation. How is that not the motivating force to get something done here?
I do believe that for all reasonable people are motivated and desirous that we would get something done. I think a big part of the problem, though, is that there's been political gamesmanship with this issue. It's suggesting that it's a zero-sum game. If you want to deal with the issue, there are practical solutions, which include creating a pathway to citizenship, fixing a broken immigration system, dealing with the root causes of why people are fleeing their home when most people don't want to leave home. And if they do, it's usually because they're fleeing some harm or they simply can't take care of their basic needs if they stay. There are solutions. And sadly, this has become such a partisan issue instead of something where we work on it together, agreeing that what we're doing is not working as a nation. It's not working.
Look, dude, I got to say this. When it comes to immigration, this has not been resolved. This has been an issue my whole adult life. It's been an issue for a long time. And it didn't matter if we had a Republican president, if we had a Democrat president. This issue in particular, they have not seemed to be able to fix. And it's a problem. And I think Kamala, again, I think she needs to stop doing interviews. Not answering the questions. She just blatantly lied to all of you and said our border is secure. It is not. Let me go to some of the comments here. Delthea says Kamala lies so much, she has to get someone else to call her dog. That was good. James, Sabs, I'm glad I found you and the gang. Your takes earlier today was sharp many times. You won me over, all of you. Praying for JB. His message touched me in many ways. Thank you so much for that, James.